Good evening, and thank you for joining tonight's candidate forum related to the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board at-large and district positions. And we will get started here shortly. If you will give us a few moments, we'll get started maybe about 3 minutes after 7 o'clock, just to give persons who are still intending to join us a little bit more time to transition. As we all know, in the Zoom world that we're in, people could still be in their final meeting of the evening. Thank you for your patience, and again, thank you for joining us. Okay, well, welcome. Welcome everyone to tonight's candidate forum for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, not only for the at-large positions, but for District 3, of which Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association and several other neighborhood associations have vested interest in. We want to first start by thanking our co-sponsors of tonight's event, which includes the Phillips West Neighborhood Organization, the Longfellow Community Council, and the Corcoran Neighborhood Organization. I will keep my comments tonight fairly brief after I introduce myself, which I forgot to do. I'm Tabitha Montgomery, and I have the pleasure of moderating tonight's candidate forum. And I have also the pleasure of serving the Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association presently as its executive director. We're going to be able to hear from the candidates shortly. One of the core ways that we're going to do that tonight in our second half of tonight's event is through the questions that those who have been able to join us tonight put forward. We encourage you to use the Q&A function in this Zoom webinar in this evening, all throughout tonight's session. And some of those questions will be able to be put forward to each of the candidates for them to have 2 minutes to respond to the questions that you put forward. As the host, we have created some preliminary questions in case your questions don't come in at the beginning of that period, but we will prioritize the questions that you have for the NPRB candidates. We are grateful for your time, and we will be under the way shortly. I just have a few opening statements an opening statement that I want to read with respect to the importance of this year's election, which is just a few short weeks away. So Minneapolis has ranked choice voting election, as you know. This fall, you will have the power to rank your first, second, and third choice candidates on the ballot for all municipal races. If your first choice is eliminated in the instant runoff, your second choice will count. If your second choice is eliminated, your third choice will count. For a single seat races for mayor, city council, and park board district, the winning candidate will be the one who has the majority of continuing ballots. In the at-large board races, each of the 3 winning candidates must earn at least 25% of the votes. Rounds of tabulation continue until all seats are filled. As you listen to the candidates tonight, consider not just your first choice, but also your second and third. You can learn more about these rules and ranked choice voting at fairvotemn.org. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with hearing directly from the candidates. Oh, and my trusty partner tonight, Julia Hobart, has dropped that website into the chat. So again, we appreciate everyone's time tonight. And we're going to go ahead and get started with hearing from our candidates. We're going to go in alphabetical order with opening statements based on the candidate's last name. And we're going to start with Commissioner Forney.
Thank you all for being out there in our virtual world and everything. Thank you, Powderhorn community, for organizing this. I want to thank you. I've been serving you as your citywide commissioner now for my second term. It is an honor and a privilege. Seriously, I am humbled by my small role in this legacy of our 138-year history. I'm proud of the accomplishments I've done in my 2 short terms, funding for our neighborhood rec centers for 20 years, utilizing a first ever racial equity matrix, adding strategic parkland to our system, targeting the gaps in our most underserved areas, and master planning the entire city's park system for long-term development and improvements. A reason why I'm seeking re-election is for forward actions for equitable access, climate resiliency, youth and senior programming, and financial sustainability. I am absolutely passionate about our park system and honored to steward it. I'm also a very, very active user of our park system. I row in the Mississippi Gorge 3 to 4 times a year, of course, seasonally. So thanks all for being here.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Forney, and my deepest apologies to candidate Alper. Clearly, I wasn't at the top of my class because your last name was so challenging, but from an alphabetical order perspective, please, you have 2 minutes to share your opening statements.
Thank you. No problem at all. Thank you so much for hosting this forum. I'm very happy to be here tonight. I'm Becky Alper, and I'm running for Minneapolis Park Board District 3. I thought for sure you were going with the at-large candidates here tonight, so I didn't think anything of it. I'm a Seward resident. I'm married to an immigrant, and I'm a working mom with 2 biracial kids. I've worked for many years in sustainable transportation and in urban planning in both the nonprofit and government sectors. I have a master's degree and have served in leadership roles on my daughter's PTA and in my professional association. I am passionate about making our parks work for all people, from my 4-year-old daughter to my 84-year-old father, while at the same time preserving our green space here in the city. I particularly want us to prioritize maintenance and upkeep of our neighborhood parks, which I view as the backbone to our exceptional park system. I joined this race because I believe that District 3 residents deserve leadership on the park board. There are serious issues affecting our park system, from aging infrastructure to wetter climates to increasing wealth disparities across our city. And you deserve a commissioner who is going to be there for you, who will listen, who will make educated decisions based on the best available information, who will be at every meeting and read every page of background material. I want to close with a statistics. 30% of kids in Minneapolis live below the poverty line. 21,000 Minneapolis public school kids receive free or reduced school lunch. Free summer meal programs offered by the park board provide a summer stopgap mechanism to literally keep kids from growing hungry. These are the types of decisions that a park board commissioner weighs in on, and why it's so important to have someone on the park.
Sorry, candidate Alper, that was time.
Thank you so much, Julia. Next, we're going to invite Commissioner French to give his opening 2-minute statements. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tabitha. My name is Minneapolis Park Commissioner Londel French, and it's been my pleasure for the last 3.5 years to serve Minneapolis as a Minneapolis Park Commissioner. I moved to Minneapolis in 1998 fleeing guns, drugs, and violence. Right now, our city is in crisis, and I believe our parks are uniquely situated to mitigate some of the violence. We have almost 50 rec centers. Back in the late 90s, when this happened before, our city council, our mayor, our park board, school board got together and they put a deluge of resources into our parks. I think that's what we need to do. That's how you look at public safety. I think that's what makes our city safer. I think that's what makes us safer. I think we need to double down on making sure that we have programming in our parks to keep our young folks occupied, and not just our young folks, but our 18 to 25-year-olds who are out here committing some of these acts. I think our parks are there for that. I think our parks used to do that. I think we just need to make sure that the resources are there. That costs money and that costs people to spend some political capital. Thank you. And I want to be another park commissioner too. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner French. Next, we will go to Candidate Kelly. If you could share your opening statements for 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Katherine Kelly. I am running for Park Board Commissioner at Large. I've been spending quite a bit of time outside and quite a bit of time in the parks. So tonight I want you to close your eyes. Just take a moment to close your eyes and envision what you want our parks to look like. What would you have in your ideal park? Would you have green space, trees, recreation, water, buildings? How do you envision our parks? Please open your eyes. I believe I'm a superwoman. I will bring my 3 passions to work with me every day when I'm on the park board. My passions, my focus, an area where we can take a lead, are park and rec, people and planet. I know I can be assistance to the park and rec because I've been on championship teams. I played soccer on championship teams, basketball on championship teams, and I work for companies that are championship teams. I've worked concession stand at Baseball Diamonds. I've been an umpire. I've worked human resource and customer service. I'm also a mother, and I'll bring that to the Park and Rec Board. My name is Katherine Kelly, and I thank you for your time and for inviting me here today. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Candidate Kelly. Next up, we have Candidate McKelvey. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the Powderhorn Neighborhood Association and all the neighborhood associations who brought us together to have the first at-large candidate forum that we've had since the convention, and for taking time on this gorgeous autumn evening to think about future leadership of our park board. My name is Mary McKelvey. I use she, her pronouns, and I coach in all seasons to all ages, lifetime sports such as biking and skiing. I'm an outdoor advocate and enthusiast, and if elected, I will activate as many people as I can to do active activities in our parks. I'm deeply connected to this city. My family on my mom's side has lived here for 5 generations, and I moved away for short stints only to realize that distance makes the heart grow fonder. And we've lived in this city since 2004. And with my husband, Chris, we raised our kids in Minneapolis public schools and signed them up for numerous park programs and played in even more of them. The perspective I bring to the board, based purely on the amount of time I've spent experiencing the parks as an adult and as a parent, is a useful one. I also bring the perspective as a teacher who's subbed in schools throughout Minneapolis, and I've had the front row to why we need access to parks after school and that bring positive influences into our city. And as a teacher, I understand how hard it is on essential workers everywhere right now. Our park system employs many essential workers, and it can feel like the burden of an entire society's needs fall on your shoulders. I want to lift up the contributions of our essential workers in our park system and in our city. And I also want transparency and clarity of all the work that is expected to get done, and to create partnerships and volunteer opportunities to get even more done together. Thanks for being here again.
Thank you so much, Candidate McKelvey. Next, we will go to Candidate Olsen. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Hi, my name's Tom Olsen. I currently live in South Uptown with my fiance Paige and our dog Perry. Just a little bit about me and why I'm running. I currently work for the Minnesota House DFL as a communication specialist, where I serve with various state representatives there, including the People of Color and Indigenous Caucus over the last couple of years here. In the past in Minneapolis, I served as the vice chair for the Community Environmental Advisory Commission. Under my tenure, we made sure to advise the city council and the mayor on various local environmental justice issues and making sure that locally, our local communities that were being overburdened by toxic environments and past grievances were being represented at the city council. This legislative and environmental experience is what I'm going to bring to the park board, which I think is sorely needed, that we have candidates who have strong government experience and an understanding of how to create policy and bring it to fruition in our city. As a commissioner, I'm going to be focusing on climate action, youth engagement, and equity within our parks. These are common goals that you will hear from many of our fellow candidates here. But I believe that I am the one with the experience and the vision to bring these to fruition. For instance, with climate action, while we have divested from coal within our pension fund, we need to make sure that we are pushing for all fossil fuels. With youth engagement, as the youngest park commissioner candidate, I believe that I represent the youth voice and will be able to ensure that our parks are serving the next generation just as well as they served the previous generation. And with equity, my work with SEAC and with the Posse Caucus, I understand what it takes to be an ally and sometimes take a back seat and listen to the communities who have the greatest need and to put their needs first and put the resources that are needed there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Candidate Olsen, for your opening statements. And certainly, last but not least, we will turn it over to Candidate Smith for your 2 minutes opening statements.
Well, thank you, guys. Good evening, and welcome to everyone who's giving up their Tuesday evening to listen to a bunch of folks who are passionate about the parks. And so thanks to everyone else for being here, and to the other candidates, thank you for being here. Alicia D Smith here, running for At-Large Park Commissioner. I work currently with the Corporate Neighborhood Organization, and I sit on several boards throughout the Twin Cities involved with gun violence prevention, as well as housing and a host of other things. But today we're talking about the parks and my excitement and passion for the parks as a parent, as a park user, as a former coach. And part of my platform and my passion around the parks are just people, programs, and safety. All the things that we know are important in our parks. And so as we have this conversation tonight, you'll hear more detail around the things that I envision for our parks, in partnership with some of the leaders that you have on this call tonight and leaders across the park system. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Candidate Smith, for your opening statements. And thank you all for taking the time to introduce yourselves to all of those that are in attendance tonight and those who will inevitably listen to this recording. We're going to go ahead and get started with questions, our Q&A portion of tonight's event. As I indicated at the beginning of tonight's session, that we will be prioritizing questions from those that are in attendance. So we encourage you, those that are participating and are attending, to use the Q&A function to submit your questions so that we have an opportunity to hear from the candidates related to your concerns or questions as it relates to the parks and related topics. And with that, as a reminder, you will each have 2 minutes to respond to each question. We will start alphabetically, but we'll rotate after that so that each of you hopefully will have an opportunity to respond to the question first. And with that, we have one question that has already been submitted. I will read it out loud and then I will drop it into the chat, and I will restate it as well for everyone to consider. Would you support NPRB use of carbon credits or offset schemes which are opposed by NAACP and many indigenous and grassroots environmental groups? If you will give me a second, I will paste that into the chat so that everybody can see that question. Again, we're going to start with candidate Alper. If you could respond to that question, you have 2 minutes and your time begins now.
Yeah, thanks so much for asking that question, Tess. I think that's something where I want to look at the outcomes that we're hoping to achieve. Are we supporting actions that can make that happen? Are we getting to what we'd like to happen in terms of, when I think about this, I think about our tree cover in particular. And I want to make sure that that we're doing something that's transparent, that we're allowing for adequate community engagement, and that we are making informed decisions on this. And so thank you so much for the link. I look forward to looking into it more.
Thank you, Candidate Alper. Next, we will go to Commissioner Forney. If you could respond to the question as stated in the chat, and I will reiterate it, which is, would you support NPRB use of carbon credits or offset schemes, which are opposed by the NAACP and many indigenous and grassroots environmental groups? You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
Thank you. I am one of the lead commissioners in our Climate Resiliency Initiative. And yes, we have been looking into the carbon offset credit. To be very frank, I am being very honest here and everything. This is the first that I've heard of it, but I do agree that it does not resolve the use of carbon. So I agree wholeheartedly, that it is a guilt reliever, I think is a good way to call it and everything. So I will look more thoroughly into it. We've had numerous conversations with the Friends of Mississippi, Mississippi Watershed Management Organization about the use of this. We are also looking at a great deal of other programs to be able to offset the tree reforestation levy that is expiring at the end of this year. What I am really advocating for is how can we take the burden off of the taxpayer to be able to continue to do the robust planting that we've been doing in the last 8 years. So I will definitely look into this and appreciate sharing the insights regarding, and like I say, I have heard that, yes, it is just a guilt reliever, and it is not really driving stopping the usage of our carbon footprint.
Thank you, Commissioner Forney. Next, Commissioner French, the same question to you. Would you support NPRB use of carbon credits or offset schemes, which are opposed by the NAACP and many indigenous and grassroots environmental groups? You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that environmental justice and racial justice are two siblings of the same family. You can't have one without the other. So if our Black and brown folks are having questions about how we continue forward, I think we need to sit down and have that conversation. More often than not, we move forward in the guise of progress, and we're not listening to our Black and brown brothers, and they're forgot about. So if these folks are having some issues, we need to sit down and have a real deep, meaningful conversation and really listen to them, and not just pay lip service to what they're saying, but actually figure out why they're opposed to this. More often than that, Black and brown voices aren't heard of when it comes to environmental issues. It's usually a white face that's in front of that, and that white face will look at it from a white perspective. So we have to look at it from all perspectives and all the people who are going to be sharing this planet.
Thank you, Thank you, Commissioner French. Next to you, Candidate Kelly, in relationship to the question that has been put forward, would you support NPRB use of carbon credits or offset schemes, which are opposed by the NAACP and many indigenous and grassroots environmental groups? You have 2 minutes. Your time starts.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I, like everyone else, will research this question more, but with the NAACP, the indigenous and environmental groups on there, I would go with them before I even read anything, but at the same time, I would see what we're supposed to do and how we can go with it. I would be on their side. If they're against it, then I would be against that also.
Thank you, Candidate Kelly. Candidate McKelvey, you have 2 minutes, and the same question goes to you, which is, would you support NPRB use of carbon credits or offset schemes, which are opposed by the NAACP and many indigenous and grassroots environmental groups? You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
If I'm commissioner on the park board, I will look at a variety of tools to limit carbon and to increase the tree canopy in the city. And this is the first, to be honest, time I've heard that it's been opposed by Indigenous and groups and NAACP, and that's definitely worth researching. And I would imagine that has to do with the source of where the carbon is the carbon credits are being offset. What is happening? Where is the pollution going to? Where are the trees being cut down? We don't want to limit, or we don't want to ruin one environment to save our Minneapolis environment. And I would, but researching that and talking to the groups who oppose it and finding out why would definitely be a first order.
Thank you, Candidate McKelvey. Next, Candidate Olsen, the same question to you. Would you support NPRB use of carbon credits or offset schemes which are opposed by the NAACP and many Indigenous and grassroots environmental groups? You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
Yeah, so I was taking the time to look through the article you posted, which is so far very enlightening, and I appreciate it. I had heard of potential issues with carbon pricing in the past, and really what it comes down to is direct action versus trying to work within a system, a market capitalist system, to somehow end something that the market wants, that the capitalist society wants to continue. And so, yeah, when we're talking about climate action, it's a priority for me. That's why I bring up directly disinvesting, that, we need to take direct action to remove what our contribution to the, corporate systems that create climate change and destruction of our environment, rather than working within rules that they set that they are okay with. This is something that, it can quite often let these corporations kind of get away with what they are doing to destroy our environment, right? If we let Exxon pay a carbon tax, that doesn't mean that they're still not, they're just going to raise the prices of their oil higher, and they're still going to pollute more. We need to stop that, right? And so that's why personally as a commissioner, I'm going to be pushing for things that directly negate the actions, destruction actions of these corporations, such as divesting completely, such as transitioning more of our park areas away from fossil fuel vehicles, such as making sure that our facilities are 100% renewable. These are going to be more effective, and contributing and supporting the these grassroots organizations which are trying to change the system rather than feel comfortable within the system, I think is important. I think there's still, we still need to look at it.
Thank you so much, Candidate Olsen. I'm sorry you've met your time. Next, we will go to Candidate Smith. The same question to you, Candidate Smith. Would you support NPRB's use of carbon credits or offset schemes, which are opposed by the NAACP and many Indigenous and grassroots environmental groups? You have 2 minutes and your time starts now.
All right, thank you. No, I wouldn't support our use of that. It's as simple. Groups like the NAACP and some of our Indigenous brothers and sisters, in terms of what they're onto and why they disagree, is really simple. It's because it further perpetuates the inequalities in communities of color. And what it does is it furthers that gap. And so when we talk about this, I think you heard many of the other candidates allude and speak directly to this provides a lip service that we're doing something right versus actual action, which I think is what Mr. Olsen was getting at, was like to actually take an action and do the right thing versus providing something that sounds good to say that we're appeasing communities and that we're targeting communities of color, when indeed the underlying factor is that we are still hurting those communities. And so we know that these type of things, they perpetuate the inequalities in these zones, which oftentimes when you talk about these are sacrificing zones or sacrifice zones, which are again, those communities of color. So that I would not support NPRB's use of these types of credits. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Smith. Next, we have another question from our attendee tonight, and it states, and we will, again, apologies, but we will be starting with Commissioner Forney. You will have the first opportunity to respond to this question for 2 minutes. Considering what the city, which of you will prioritize conserving and preserving the natural habitats of the NPRB There are currently 3 contending park focuses: recreation, maintenance, and nature preservation. I want to know who will focus and fund conservation, preservation, stopping all pesticides and herbicides, bird flyaways, turtle hatching protection early in the year, and provide ecological education to the youth of Minneapolis and our green and protected areas. I know that was a lengthy question. If you give me an opportunity to post it in a chat, I will do so. And then candidate Forney, you will have 2 minutes to respond to the question.
Thank you. As I indicated, I am one of the lead commissioners in our climate resiliency initiative. And so all the things that are being stated in here are very near and dear to me. Youth has been one of our major focuses, this board, excuse me. To me, climate change is going to impact our youth the most. And so hearing particularly the last statement, provide ecological education to the youth of Minneapolis. Our levy for next year is, our budget for next year is to focus on youth employment in the environmental area. So I'm very excited about this. This is the priority to me, is our nature preservation, I think is the way it was stated here. It is most definitely my highest priority, particularly knowing that we have youth funding for the next 5 years, and how we engage our youth in that is, to me, it's so critical. And I feel that parks really are our most vital tool in dealing with climate change, particularly, in underserved areas where we have had so much, that's where our heat islands are. That's where, our water quality and air quality and everything is the most severe. And we need to address that. And like I say, it's through our parks. I should tell you that we are looking at all sorts of different funding. The American Rescue Plan, please, the infrastructure bill that is being talked about too much. These are funding mechanisms that we are looking at to actually have to make this happen. So
thank you so much, Commissioner Forney. Next, we will go to Commissioner French. Commissioner French, you have 2 minutes for the same question, which is, which of you will prioritize conserving and preserving the natural habitats of the MPRB? There are currently 3 contending park focuses: recreation, maintenance, nature preservation. I want to know who will focus and fund conservation, preservation, stopping all pesticides and herbicides, bird flyways, turtle hatching protection early in the year, and provide ecological education to the youth of Minneapolis and our green and protected areas. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I want to commend Commissioner Forney for pointing out the fact that we have a conservation program for our kids who are, I always say there's 2 types of people who love our parks. There's the people, and then there's the people who love the grass and the trees and stuff. The grass and the trees have to be loved by the people. And so I want to make sure that the people who come to those parks to enjoy the green space are taken care of. So yeah, I do think that we need to preserve green space and reduce pesticides for the people who are coming to our parks. But I also want to make sure I am prioritizing the people who are actually using our parks and the people who are traditionally been marginalized or traditionally haven't had a chance to use our parks free like everybody else has had. So that is my focus. That is what I will prioritize.
More of the stuff that's up there that we don't want to.
Thank you so much, Commissioner French. Next to you, candidate Kelly, the same question, and I will restate it. So which of you will prioritize conserving and preserving the natural habitats of the MPRB? There are currently 3 contending park focuses: recreation, maintenance, and nature preservation. I want to know who will focus and fund conservation, preservation, stopping all pesticides and herbicides, bird flyaways, turtle hatching protection early in the year, and provide ecological education to the youth of Minneapolis and our green and protected areas. You have 2 minutes, candidate Kelly.
Thank you. Great question, very in-depth. My 3 focus areas are park and rec, people, and planet. And this is under the planet category. I believe that to become the best park and rec in the world, these are all things that we need to do. When I was growing up, I am setting my timer real quick. I At the age of 5, I watched my grandma and grandpa create a golf course out of a Minnesota farm. And on that golf course, they did not use pesticides. And it was a beautiful golf course. I believe that our Parks and Rec can be a beautiful place to be without pesticides. I just posted something either on my Twitter or Facebook about turtles. I'm all for helping turtles hatch and get to where they're going. I'm all for the bird flyaways. I was just learning about a city, I think it's Pittsburgh, that was going to start dimming the lights at night to help the wildlife. And I believe that that could be something Minneapolis could look at if we partnered with the city council and other people. I believe that we need to educate our youth. If we educate them young, they'll know later on in life how to care for the planet. I believe that we should build green and sustainable and protect areas. I think Minneapolis Park and Rec is doing a phenomenal job. I'm from Fargo, North Dakota, and I always came here as a kid and loved the parks. The last 6 years, I've enjoyed being at as many parks as I can.
Thank you so much, Candidate Kelly. You have reached the end of your time. Next, we will turn that over to, or ask and invite Candidate McKelvey to respond to the same question, and I will restate that, Candidate McKelvey, for you. Which of you will prioritize conserving and preserving the natural habitats of the NPRB? There are currently 3 contending park focuses: recreation, maintenance, and nature preservation. I want to know who will focus and fund conservation, preservation, stopping all pesticides and herbicides, bird flyaways, turtle hatching protection early in the year, and provide ecological education to the youth of Minneapolis and our green and protected areas. Candidate McKelvey, you have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
Well, I hope to be one of the people that's at the top of that list. I don't know, I can't speak for everybody about who will be the person to prioritize conservation. I would like to say that nature, recreation, and maintenance may not necessarily be contending. I think they can work in conjunction with each other. And we're in a campaign right now, and let's face it, campaign is about convincing people. And I also think that it's human nature to want to see what's in it for them. And I believe that the more that we work with people in our parks of all ages, and actually this is a great intergenerational way to get people together in our shared green spaces, the more that people find out and become awed by what we have right here in our city with our natural habitats, the more they're going to want to take care of it. And the more then their hearts will be open to preserving it, and the more that we'll have environmental stewards. So I also think that we could maybe rethink, we have a Department of Asset Management, and assets are also our natural spaces, and we need to really think of them not just as, you know, our paved areas, as our parking lots, as our recreation centers. We do need to think about our connected habitats, our Mississippi River, our waterways, and our green spaces in a way that brings more people. The Eloise Butler Wildflower Garden, the more that we bring people into those spaces and allow them to experience them for themselves, we will have more care of that environment. So I think
Thank you, Candidate McKelvey. Next, Candidate Olsen, the same question to you, and it states, which of you will prioritize conserving and preserving the natural habitats of the NPRB? There are currently 3 contending park focuses: recreation, maintenance, and nature preservation. I want to know who will focus and fund conservation, preservation, stopping all pesticides and herbicides, bird flyaways, turtle hatching protection early in the year, and provide ecological education to the youth of Minneapolis in our green and protected areas. Candidate Olsen, you have 2 minutes and your time starts now.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I will start off by saying that I'm not going to prioritize one thing in our parks to the neglect of another aspect. These are all very important, and so I'm going to work my hardest to balance them. That being said, I have a strong background in environmental issues. I am the sole at-large candidate endorsed by the Sierra Club. And I believe that I'm well suited to take action to preserve our natural environment. And here are some things that I hope to do. Number one, we need to go back and look at the Hiawatha Master Plan. And we need to revote on that and make sure that we are transitioning that polluting a golf course, which is no longer sustainable in that area, towards a space that is more natural for our environment. A space that is a natural wetland that we can then have youth programming in, more nature adventure space for our wildlife to thrive. These are tough decisions. It's a tough decision, but it was a compromise plan and we should go back and embrace that. Also, our park funds that are devoted to acquisition of new land should be devoted, I believe, virtually solely to acquiring land along the Mississippi in North and Northeast Minneapolis. Here we can create connections to the Mississippi River and to our natural river environments and restore these industrial areas to a more natural space while creating connections for our North and Northeast residents. These are just a few things I'm going to do, and I will prioritize them, but they're going to play a balanced role in what I support and what I seek as a commissioner in regards to the other priorities that you mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Olsen. Next to you, Candidate Smith. You will have 2 minutes to answer the same question. Which of you will prioritize conserving and preserving the natural habitats of the MPRB? There are currently 3 contending park focuses: recreation, maintenance, and nature preservation. I want to know who will focus and fund conservation, preservation, stopping all pesticides and herbicides, bird flyaways, turtle hatching protection early in the year, and provide ecological education to youth of Minneapolis in our green and protected spaces. You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
Awesome, thank you. Great question. And I too, just like the 2 candidates that you heard prior to me, Mary and both Tom, don't believe that these are contending issues. And I don't think we have to choose. I think we have to look at both ends. How do we do all of these things and provide the best park system for all of the users? I think we heard Commissioner French say that it's important that everyone feels welcome and included, and that includes how we address the environments that surrounding our parks and the environment, the natural habitats that exist within the parks. And so I think it's important that we're not pitting these issues against one another, but they're all equally important because they all have a dramatic impact on the lives of the people that use the park and the people that frequent the parks daily. And so that would be my response at this point. And I would do some more research in terms of what additional things can we bring in and how do we make these opportunities for growth and progression and learning intergenerational, not just the young and the old, but what about those of us in between that maybe still have some learning and growing to do? And how do we do that fairly and make it educational and fun and not punitive to people because maybe they didn't know? And so that would be my stance on the topic in this question. A very important series of questions when they're in there. So thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Candidate Smith. The next candidate to ask to respond to this question, Candidate Alper, you are the last for this particular question put forward. And it is, which of you will prioritize conserving and preserving the natural habitats of the MPRB? There are currently 3 contending park focuses: recreation, maintenance, and nature preservation. I want to know who will focus and fund conservation, preservation, stopping all pesticides and herbicides, bird flyways, turtle hatching protection early in the year, and provide ecological education to the youth of Minneapolis in our green and protected spaces. You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
Thanks very much. I want to mention that I am the District 3 Sierra Club endorsed candidate. I hold our natural habitat and our green space in Minneapolis very high. I think it's that we need to treasure our areas that are not paved. One of the trends that we can expect in Minneapolis over the next few decades is that we can have more people. And so I think we need to make sure that people see the connections to the natural world, and we help raise awareness about how their daily choices in their lives impact the natural world, and vice versa, because I know that I certainly in my family gains, it's a source of mental and physical health to be in the natural world. And I think we need to make those help people make those connections. And I really appreciate what the person who asked the question wrote in about ecological education to youth. And I think that's a great starting point. One of the things that I have noticed, particularly focusing on District 3, is that the pipe shed leading into the Lake Hiawatha, a lot of that comes from neighborhoods in District 3. And so a lot of the trash that comes into the lake comes from those neighborhoods. And I think this is something where we can treat it with infrastructure, but I also think we need to help people make the connection and see the way in which their actions are impacting the natural world, and help them see the benefits of the natural world for them too.
Thank you so much, Candidate Alper. The next question to all candidates, and we will begin with Commissioner French. You will have the first 2 minutes to respond to this question. Last year, Powderhorn Park was at the center of a debate about unhoused neighbors taking shelter in city parks. What do you believe is the park board's role in addressing homelessness and responding to encampments? How will you respond to encampments and unsheltered residents?
That's a great. Thank you for that question, Tab. I think our job as a park board is to become huge advocates, but we also have to understand that we have a responsibility as the largest landowner in the city of Minneapolis. We have a responsibility to advocate for the folks who don't have housing right now. The folks who are living in Powderhorn last summer, they're still on the streets. They just don't live in Powderhorn anymore. And so out of sight, out of mind can't be our policy. No, parks aren't the most conducive places for folks to stay at, but it was a crisis situation. And just like if there was a tornado or some type of natural disaster that put hundreds of people out of their house, I wouldn't say you can't stay in our parks, because that's not where people stay at. We will use our parks as stopgap measures, and we will make sure that the people who have that task and have that fiduciary duty to make sure they're taking care of our unhoused are doing it. When I pick up the phone and call folks from the county and the state and they say, there's nothing we can do, that's a problem. So our job is to be proactive in making sure that we're lobbying the state and the county to make sure that we don't have folks who are not being taken care of on our streets, folks who are dealing with mental health issues, because that's what I see. I was there every day, and what I seen was at least 5 or 6 of my former students, and I work with kids with mental health issues out in our parks. And if we had 600 people, 600 young men and young women suffering from Down syndrome, I don't think we would respond the same way. And so we had a lot of people that were out in our parks hurting, and we on the park board responded to it. And so I don't know how we will respond to something that's a crisis like that in the future. Hopefully we'll respond with our hearts and make sure that we treat people with the dignity and humanity that everybody needs to be treated with.
Thank you, Commissioner French. Next, we're going to go to Candidate Kelly. The same question to you. Last year, Powderhorn Park was at the center of a debate about unhoused neighbors taking shelter in city parks. What do you believe is the park board's role in addressing homelessness and responding to encampments? How will you respond to encampments and unsheltered residents? You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now, Candidate Kelly.
Thank you. This is a crisis for our town, for our state, for other states, and all over the world. There's refugees and homeless people, and we're all facing this. Breaks my heart to see these people, especially when I drive by with my family in the car. I believe that Minneapolis Parks and Rec should partner with nonprofits in the city to see what we can do. I believe that we've been doing the same thing for a long time now, and I think that we could figure out a way to improve and do something better right? Because if this crisis is going to get worse and worse, it needs our attention now. We don't need to wait another 10, 20 years until there's more refugees, more homeless people. I believe that we should not take out homeless people at 7 a.m. and kick them out of their homes and throw all their stuff away. I believe there's a better way for Park and Rec to assist if there are encampments on the Park and Rec property. And I believe that we can do that with the community groups here in town, and we can do it in a more civil and friendly and humane way to where we're helping them move to the next spot that they need to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Kelly. Next, Candidate McKelvey, the same question to you. Last year, Powderhorn Park was at the center of a debate about unhoused neighbors taking shelter in city parks. What do you believe is the park board's role in addressing homelessness and responding to encampments? How will you respond to encampments and unsheltered residents? You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
Yeah, that has been a really difficult issue, and in 2020 especially. And we learned a lot from last year. The park board, for the first time, really had a lot of opportunity to interact with a lot of people experiencing homelessness all at once. And I think the park board the staff learned a lot. The role of the park board is the parks will be probably the first place that someone might be seen who is looking for shelter or experiencing homelessness. And for that reason, the park board, I believe the best way for people to be treated with dignity is to individually meet with individuals one at a time. And I was so impressed at a recent park board meeting. The Street Reach staff has been doing a wonderful job with doing that. There's a team of at least 6 people that are talking to people and connecting them with resources and places to stay, and and all of the different needs that someone experiencing homelessness has to deal with. There's a difference between dealing with unsheltered residents and allowing full encampments. And I believe that the park board has a lot of roles in the daytime where they can be helping individuals experiencing homelessness. Hennepin County is the place with that has the infrastructure all together, and we need to keep on partnering with them and working with them and pushing them to provide not only.
Thank you, Candidate McKelvey. Next, Candidate Olsen, the same question to you. Last year, Powderhorn Park was at the center of a debate about unhoused neighbors taking shelter in city parks. What do you believe is the park board's role in addressing homelessness and responding to encampments? How will you respond to encampments and unsheltered residents? You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
Yeah, well, I believe our role is just that of everyone else in our community, and is that it's to do what we can to stop this issue that is going on in circles, and it's something that is a national issue, it's a state issue, it's everywhere. So we have to we can't ignore it, right? And so what I see our role is in times of crisis, much like Londel says, we can certainly provide space and be a stopgap measure if the city and council and if the city and county do not have the resources, or state have the resources to help out folks as they need to be helped. And yeah, we absolutely need to be lobbying at the state level, because these individuals are not all from Minneapolis, right? They're from throughout the state. And we need to make the state government understand that we can't keep taking on all of this burden. And we're happy to do it, but we need the resources to do it as well. And what actually that did lead to was Rep. Aisha Gomez in the Preventing Homelessness Division got $20 million for youth homeless prevention. that's fantastic. That's what we need to keep doing, and we really need to be advocating. So as your commissioner, what I'm going to be doing is using my legislative experience. I'm still going to be working at the State House. I'm going to be incessant on this. I'm going to be talking to the people. I'm going to be in committee. I'm going to be pushing on this constantly. And in the meantime, we need to treat people with compassion and ensure that they have stable environments, and that we do not perpetuate a harmful system that makes this go on for longer and costing our society even more. So it's going to be hard. It's going to be messy, but the buck stops here, basically.
Thank you so much, Candidate Olsen. Next to you, Candidate Smith, the same question. Last year, Powderhorn Park was at the center of a debate about unhoused neighbors taking shelter in city parks. What do you believe is the park board's role in addressing homelessness and responding to encampments? How will you respond to encampments and unsheltered residents? You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
Well, first, I think it's a great question. I think it's an important question. And it's a crisis that is unfortunately affecting the entire US. And so it is the park's job to be a part of the solution. This is everyone's issue. This is not just a park or county or city or state level issue. It's all of our issues. And so we have to push and move with the urgency as if it was us. And I think it's really that simple. And you've heard many of the candidates talk about how we need to treat our fellow neighbors, whether they're housed or unhoused, with compassion, with dignity, with respect. We also need to get to the root cause of this. The reality is that we are in an economic crisis in these communities where we see people who are constantly in this cycle of being housed or unhoused, or people who find themselves searching into Minneapolis or commuting into Minneapolis or migrating to Minneapolis for a better life because of the lure of better jobs or better opportunities or better support systems from our human services. We have to capitalize on that and we have to deliver. And so part of what I will be doing is helping to push Tom, who's working over at the legislative. As he mentioned, he would be incisive about this issue. And I think it's important that we have advocates and we know where we can push. And I think that no matter what the outcome of this campaign for all of us is that we understand that these issues are not going anywhere. And it bothers me and it pains me to see people living with their families out on the street. That is a us issue, all of us, those who have power by being elected and those who have power by being human beings. Let's figure out a collective solution. And that is what I plan to do, is to work collectively with everyone who wants to address it and really tackle the issue.
Thank you so much, Candidate Smith. Next to you, Candidate Alper, the same question. Last year, Powderhorn Park was at the center of debate about unhoused neighbors taking shelter in city parks. What do you believe is the park board's role in addressing homelessness and responding to encampments? How will you respond to encampments and unsheltered residents? You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
Thank you. There's no doubt that we are in the midst of what is a nationwide housing crisis, 40 years in the making. We also know a lot more than we did even 10 years ago. There's research out there that a housing first model works. It works in terms of economics. It works for the people being served. So one of the things that the park board can do through its appointments to, let's say, the Planning Commission, can be to make sure that we are allowing for building ample housing within our city. And I would say that's both affordable housing and market rate housing, so that we are meeting the need. There's a huge demand for housing here in Minneapolis. So that's one concrete thing that I'd like to see happen. I also believe that the park board definitely has a role to play, but does not have the capacity to take on what really is, I would say, Minnesota's housing crisis alone. That we need to have a voice at the table, and I want to see the park board stepping up more for dignified shelter and housing options that meet people where they're at. So for me, that means shelters that offer daytime hours, that don't send Minneapolis residents to far-flung places like Chanhassen, for example, and that there's a safe place for people to use, because that's a lot of comments that I've gotten especially families with kids, don't want to be at parks where they might encounter needles. I know there's an unsheltered people policy within the park board. I see that work continuing and developing with experts on staff, experts in the community, and just general.
Thank you so much, candidate Alper. And last but not least, Commissioner Forney, the same question to you. Last year, Powderhorn Park was at the center of a debate about unhoused neighbors taking shelter in city parks. What do you believe is the park board's role in addressing homelessness and responding to encampments? How will you respond to encampments and unsheltered residents? You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
Thank you. I too was directly involved with the encampments and learned all too well the pain of this issue of mental health, addiction, affordable housing. It's so many issues. And unfortunately, what I did find out is that we don't have the resources. And we did as best as we could last year. At Powderhorn, I'm sure most of you know, there was a 14-year-old that was raped. One of our primary missions is the health and safety of our youth. And so, I'm sorry, I'm losing it here. I was the associate director for Project for Pride and Living, and so I understand housing is an enormous issue, and what we can do in the park system has been, I think, beautifully executed this year. Our staff, who I can remember somebody mentioned about our street outreach group, have been able to get people immediately into the resources that they need. And there is such a vast degree of resources that are needed. And so as some other people indicated that, we need to be advocating with the state, with the county, where that is their wheelhouse. And that doesn't mean that we do not have a responsibility. And I think that our street outreach people have done a marvelous job of advocating for those individuals who need those resources that are specifically for them and for their needs. And at the same time, we have an.
Thank you, Commissioner Forney. As I had mentioned at the beginning during our prep before tonight's forum started, that I would give you a heads up when I thought that we might be at our last question. I hope it's not, because there's a bunch of rich ones that have come in, and hopefully we can get to 2 more. But just fair warning, this might be the last one before your candidate closing statements. And we will be beginning with Candidate Kelly. So the question is, the Minneapolis Parks Board has an annual budget of over $100 million. And a staff of over 1,000 employees. Please describe your experience when it comes to financial or personal management. How has this experience prepared you to be a policymaker for the Minneapolis park system? We will again begin with Candidate Kelly. I've just dropped the question into the chat. You will have 2 minutes to respond. Your time starts now.
Thank you. Good question. First off, I'm a mom. I am the head of household when it comes to doing taxes. So I pay the bills, I buy the food at home, I do all that stuff. I have to make sure I don't go into debt. Where I work, I am in charge of donations. So people, nonprofits will come up to me and request money and request funds. I look at how much the company has, and I have to figure out how much each group will get during the course of a year and how I can have money left at the end of the year to still give people donations. I'm also in charge of buying things for the team members. So if we have things like Labor Day, where we give back to our team members and thank them, we buy them lunch. I have to call around, order the food from places, make sure it gets there on time. So yeah, I kind of feel like I'm hands-on. The dollar amounts, you might say, are different. But at the same time, I think I'd have more checks and balances then, because You know, why are we spending $75,000 to purchase something when maybe we could bring that cost down a little bit, make it green and sustainable? Why are we tearing down a building and spending money? Is that building still usable and can we keep it up? I'm also interested from the HR perspective about the 1,000 employees. I'm interested in meeting them, seeing what they do, see how the hierarchy works from park board to superintendent, and then the next people. I believe I'm prepared to help out. Again, even though I'm on a smaller scale for.
Thank you, Candidate Kelly. Next, Candidate McKelvey, the same question to you, and I will restate it. So the Minneapolis Park Board has an annual budget of over $100 million and a staff of over 1,000 employees. Please describe your experience when it comes to financial or personnel management. How has this experience prepared you to be a policymaker for the Minneapolis park system?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's an important one. And one of the biggest roles of a park board commissioner is to make good choices about the budget. Personally, the way our lives have worked out, I'm household manager and general manager for things that are going on with our household. I've been on several boards and understand a spreadsheet that way. I've been on community advisory councils where we talk about the potential cost and look at the spreadsheet there. I'm also on the board of our church, where that is one of the major roles that I play in making sure that our church is running well. I will ask, I understand that I do not have as much experience with the budget as perhaps some of the other people on this call. And I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I'm not going to talk about it as if I know about it until I really ask a lot of the questions. And I have enough experience to know that that I make good financial decisions and I can follow the spreadsheet, and I will talk to those affected before I make financial decisions. Thanks.
Thank you, Candidate McKelvey. And in the spirit of saving time, so hopefully we can get to an additional question, I will suspend me rereading the question. Please refer to the chat. We are turning it over to Candidate Olsen. You have 2 minutes to respond.
Yeah, so I have a few different things that I think qualify me for the specific question. First off, my work at the Capitol in the last few years, I have had to have an intimate knowledge of various budget bills and policy bills within them, and understanding particularly how that works and how it can be very difficult as a politician to make a choice between a good decision and a very good decision. That can come down to a lot of very small things, and that's really difficult to balance. That's also something I learned as the chair of the finance committee and my student senate in college. Our budget wasn't quite so big as the park board, but it was around $330,000. And we had to make similar decisions, and the budgeting was completely up to us. And so I understand how these processes work. I actually kind of like it. I like looking at spreadsheets and playing video games that are basically math and understanding these concepts. On the personnel side, as the vice chair for the Community Environmental Advisory Commission, I was a leader within that group of a couple dozen folks, and making sure that we were headed towards the right track on reforming our bylaws to make them so that they were more equitable and I'm trying to think of the word, but actually displayed the actual look of Minneapolis that we needed to be a representative community within that. So personnel less so, but on the budget side, very much so. And I'm ready to get in, and I think I have the base experience to be a strong commissioner in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Candidate Olsen. Next, Candidate Smith, the same question to you. You have 2 minutes. Starts now.
Okay, thank you. Great question. Yes, the park board does have a fairly large budget, and certainly part of what goes into managing a budget is knowing your budget. And so assessing where you're spending money and where you can trim or find an alternative provider at a lesser cost to the organization. So that's one thing. So I'm familiar with budgets, both big and small, not quite as large as the park board, but we're talking dollars and cents here. And so if you can manage a checkbook, you can figure it out. And I think that any of the folks on this call are capable of doing that. As you've heard them speak to their personal experiences with their families or through their work or through their organizations that they were a part of through college or whatever the case may be. Personnel, I have a great deal of experience in managing hundreds of people, thousands of people, depending on what type of event is going on. And that's about providing direction and leadership and delegating and making sure people are clear about what they're supposed to do and giving them some room for growth. It's about giving some liberties and making some concessions so that we can serve the people that we need to serve. And that's a part of what we talk about with our park board. We have diverse communities, and what's good for the community, maybe in North Minneapolis, might be different. What's different from that, that's the community in Northeast Minneapolis or Southeast Minneapolis. And so giving some flexibility and some autonomy to our park staff to be able to serve the people that are coming to our parks. And so we kind of have a base of what is our standard for excellence, and then given some autonomy to be flexible there. And so that would be my plan, and that would be my vision for execution.
Thank you so much, Candidate Smith. Next to you, Candidate Alper, the same question. You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
Thank you. Well, most recently, I was outreach director at Move Minneapolis. I worked in outreach and policy. I've worked on grants and contracts. I have a master's degree in geographic information science, where I lived and breathed spreadsheets and data. I also speak Spanish fluently. And I think that's really important. And I want to bring that up because District 3 is an incredibly diverse district. It stretches from 35W to the river, all the way down to 36th Street and up to Cedar Riverside. So we've got East African communities, we've got Latinx population, we have a large Native population. So I really want to say that while I really appreciate this question, and I think I bring experience to this question, it's also important to have those on the ground connections and on the ground experience to be able to bridge some of, frankly, the bureaucracy at the Minneapolis Park Board and make sure that we're effectively engaging different communities. And I plan to do this work by leaning in and showing up, listening to the communities and listening, frankly, to all voices. So I want to make sure that they see their connection with the budget and with staff at MPRB and see themselves represented. And I think that's really important. Thanks.
Thank you, Candidate Alper. Commissioner Forney, if you would please respond to the same question. You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
Well, definitely I'm not an accountant, but it's funny, I did not think about it until this moment and everything, that every, shall I say, primer position that I've had on boards started out as the treasurer. So never thought about that thread in my life and everything. First of all, I think the most important thing is that as far as our budgets are the reflection of our values. And that is one thing that the board, when we first start off, we always said, what is our vision? Okay. And that is what dictates how we set our budgets. I've done this actually tomorrow night. We'll begin our budgeting process. It will be my 8th budget for the park board. And like I say, it will always be measured by what our values are. Youth was one of our primary thing that we have been advocating for, and I'm very thankful that that is going to be the primary thing that will constitute this budget this coming year. Another thing I want to say is something that you don't think about, and the fact is that the Minneapolis Park Board has a balanced budget. We all know that the federal government does not. And, you know, so I think that's a huge endeavor that we have accomplished, particularly through the pandemic last year, that we were able to come through with a balanced budget. But definitely our budget will be dictated by our values.
Thank you, Commissioner Forney. And next to you, Commissioner French, the same question. You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
And I'm
as a former park worker, one of my first jobs here in Minneapolis after working in the schools was working in our parks. And we have a lot of work to do when it comes to treating our park workers fairly and treating them like they should be treated as frontline workers. I've been working on that for the last 3.5 years. There's still a lot of work to do. Budget-wise, I have been on the executive board of my local union. I work at the largest union in the state of Minnesota, which goes around and help locals negotiate contracts with school boards. So we look at school board contracts, we look at school board budgets, and we figure out what's important, what's not important, and what we want to prioritize. That being said, priorities on this budget should be youth. Our city's in crisis, and I want to make sure we're prioritizing public safety, and that prioritizing by hiring a bunch of more cops, but prioritizing by putting our kids to work, which we used to do. We used to put hundreds of kids to work in our city. We've gotten away from that. We haven't done that in a level that's meaningful since 2007, and that shows you that our priorities in our budgeting process hasn't worked. It's not working. And we also, Meg said, we actually have a budget surplus at the park board, and it's because of golf. So just.
But I think that's an example of a time where, decades before you and I were born, somebody said,
I'm done. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Appreciate that, Commissioner French. Listen, you can put it in your comments about okay. So we are 16 after the hour, and I am grateful to each of you. And so we are going to focus on your closing comments next. We're not able to get to an additional question. I want to honor everyone's time, but I will lift up as you're preparing to drop your contact information into the chat. We talked about that. I'm confident people that have been able to join us tonight, they might have additional questions for you. And it would be great if you could put into the chat a way for them to contact you and or your campaign for them to do follow-up. But there were questions related to overall safety within the park system from a holistic perspective, and additional to concepts related to things like the land back movement in terms of how you see land back to our Native brothers and sisters, and in terms of for the land for which we all are currently on that has been stolen, and others that we did not get to. But I bring that up to let you know that the people that have been able to attend tonight are very much concerned and interested and invested in the health of the overall park system, and they are relying on you to be able to offer some clarity related to how you will support that moving forward. With that, we are entering into the final round for tonight, and that's your closing statements. Again, you will have 2 minutes, and we will begin with candidate McKelvey. Your time starts now. Thank you again.
Just a question about, should I answer what you just mentioned before? Or?
Oh, absolutely not. Just we have no time for that, candidate McKelvey. I'm sorry for any confusion. Again, that was really just the only thing I was inviting all of the candidates to do, to drop your contact information into the chat. We don't have time to, we plan to end tonight close to 8:30. So we wouldn't have time to do that. This is truly an opportunity, just like your opening statement, to make your final comments tonight, not only to those who have been able to attend, but remember, we plan to share this out, the recording, of tonight's forum in a couple of different manners online. Your time starts now.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for listening tonight. I probably don't have to be the one to tell you that this election in our city is one of the most important that our city has faced in quite some time. So I really appreciate that you're taking the time to listen to park board candidates, and to the rest of the candidates out there. I really respect all of you, and I look forward to the chance to work with you, either as an elected or as the person who's passionate about the parks. My name is Mary McKelvey. My chat I'll get to after this. I'm at maryforparks.org. And I just wanted to say some of the things that I will particularly focus on that I think will help towards the safety and connectivity of our city. I will be working towards well-coordinated programming that attracts and engages young people, both in employment and both in finding things that are really interesting to them, especially middle school age. I, as a teacher, really wonder what is happening with kids after school. I will celebrate and take care of what Minneapolis is known for outside of the state. We are the city of lakes, and we are the headwater. We're at the top of the Mississippi River. Those waterways are sacred and special, and I want to treat them that way. I will make sure that we create systems that are transparent and principled through master planning, and that we've already done, and and through the park board budgeting process that finds out what kind of work is already being done and what.
Thank you so much, candidate McKelvey. I almost forgot my role here. Let's keep the trains moving. So candidate Olsen, please, your closing statements, you have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
Yeah, well, again, just thank you all for coming out and spending time with us this evening. Obviously, you recognize, just as every other candidate up here, just how important our parks are. They really do, form the fabric that binds our community together. Without them, these last couple of years, which were already really hard, might have been completely disastrous. But I also think that with them, we're going to kind of come back really strong. So just as your commissioner, I mean, I told you a little bit about my experience. I told you about what I want to accomplish. But I guess I just want to close in saying, personally, that I really care about our parks, and I really care about this job. And I really care about being a committed commissioner who is listening to you and being receptive. I'm not always going to agree with you, but I'll still respond. And I think it's important that we build those bridges. I think it's important that we have commissioners who are committed and putting in the work every day. And I will be doing that for at least one term if I'm elected, and I'll be giving it my all in making sure that our park system, which is number 3, in the nation, is back on top and serving everyone equitably, fairly, and making sure that our next century of parks is just as good as the last century. So that's my value. That's what I'm going to bring to it. And I hope you support me with your first choice vote this November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you so much, candidate Olsen. Next to you, candidate Smith, your closing statements. You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
Well, thank you. First, let me start off by thanking everybody again. Thanks for taking the courage to put yourself out there and to be under the microscope of us as critical humans who tend to judge and take a particular interest in our own individual selfish needs. So thank you all for that. But super simple. I'm Alicia D Smith. I'm running for Parks at Large. A vote for me is really a vote for you. I'm all about community. This is an important time, not only in our country's history, but most importantly, Minnesota is at the center of what we are going to see for change, and Minneapolis in particular. And the parks have an opportunity to really set the standard for how our parks across this country work and partner with other intergovernmental agencies, with social service agencies, and most importantly, with community. And so as you think about casting your vote on November 2nd, I ask that you consider ranking me as your #1 choice. And if you have any further questions, definitely feel free to reach out to me. But the parks are extremely critical. As a park user, former coach, and now as a mother, I get to experience all facets of our parks. And hopefully I will hit the age where I will be able to say I'm a senior who gets to experience the parks. So I'll have reached every milestone of park usage. So I thank you all for your time tonight. For those of you who gave up your Tuesday night to engage with us, thanks to all the sponsors and thanks to all the other candidates.
Thank you so much, candidate Smith. Next to you, candidate Alper, your closing statements. You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
I want to leave you with an anecdote, a small story. This past summer, I had the joy of watching my 2 girls sharpen their swimming skills and stay cool by visiting wading pools and splash pads across District 3. But unfortunately, we found that many times the pools we wanted to visit were closed for maintenance issues or weren't open because of school closing and opening policies. With climate change, we know that we can expect hotter summers. And for many residents in District 3, especially for people without air conditioning, our neighborhood pools are both a health and an equity issue. So I want to leave you real quick with my top 3 priorities. I want to make sure that we are preparing our parks for the impacts of climate change, both in terms of infrastructure and our service delivery. I think we need to double down on investing in youth programming and employment opportunities. And this to me is all the way from Rec Plus childcare up to activities for teens, up to young adult job training programs like Teen Teamworks. And last but not least, I want to make sure that we're building community with our parks and our park platforms, breaking barriers, building cross-cultural connections, and doing inclusive engagement. As the District 3 candidate here tonight, in amongst with the at-large candidates, I plan to do this work day in and day out, to be at all the meetings, to show up, quite frankly, and be responsive to your input and engage with constituents. So I look forward to your first choice vote for District 3 this November 2nd. Thank you so much.
Thank you, candidate Alper. Next to you, Commissioner Forney, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement. Your time starts now.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending, and for those of you who are going to be viewing after the fact. I am truly humbled to have been one of your citywide commissioners for the past almost 8 years. Parks define the quality of life of the city. And I get so excited about the work that we've done and the vision for the future. One of the things I wanted to mention is the fact that in Powderhorn, in your area, there has been strategic parcels added to our park system. And that's one thing that is very, very important to me. I noticed in the chat that some people were asking about the role, how Indigenous people in their basically reparations. And I want you to know that there's some very, very engaging conversations happening around the St. Anthony Falls, because there will be land that will be available. And we are making sure that that is a priority, that that community is in ownership. Is probably the best way to say it. Water quality is a real important thing. I noticed that somebody asked about Powderhorn Pond, and that is something we will be very actively involved with, particularly, as I said, with funding come from the state and from the federal government. Policing is something that I know is very near and dear, or should we say, of issue in Powderhorn. And I just want you to know that is something I've been very actively involved in, and how we can transition away from policing and instead more to our street reach. So I ask for your #1 vote. Like I say, it's been an honor. I also want you to know that I probably am one of the more responsive commissioners. So please, in the chat, contact me if you have further questions. Have a great day or evening. Go out and see the full moon.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Forney. Next to you, Commissioner French, your closing statements. You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody for their time here on this beautiful Tuesday night. I just want to say my closing statement is I moved to Minneapolis in 1998. And I'll tell anybody who wants to hear it, Minneapolis saved my life. I was running from drugs, violence, and gangs, and just a whole bunch of foolishness that was going on in Milwaukee. Minneapolis has a lot more lives to save. They have a lot more lives to save. We are in a crisis right now, and I think we need to use our parks to mitigate some of that crisis that's going on. Our young folks are in chaos right now. We've seen this already back in the 90s. And there was a deluge of resources that came to our parks, that came from the schools, that came from the city council and the state. That needs to happen again. So for the next, I have work to do. I've still got some work to do, and I want to go and make sure that the young folks that we have forgotten about, who are out here causing all this chaos, are thought about and advocated for. And that's what I said I was going to do 3 years ago when I ran for office, and I would advocate for folks who are traditionally not advocated for. And that's what I've been doing for the last 3.5 years. And I want to continue to do that work. I'm asking for your #1 vote to be a Minneapolis Park Commissioner at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner French. And last but not least, Candidate Kelly, your closing statements. You have 2 minutes. Your time starts now. And again, just before you begin, apologies, we are at time, but we are going to continue until we hear the final candidate and make some final wrap-up statements. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you for hosting. I appreciate you, Montgomery and Hobart. Hopefully I said your names right. Thank you for everything you did, all the emails, the phone calls, prepping us for these questions. Also, I'd like to thank every candidate. I've learned something from each of you. Thank you for running. I think it takes a special kind of person to run for office and want to serve the community. So thank you. I will bring balance, stability, and core strength in the areas that the Powderhorn group tonight told us about, which is equity, community health, and environment. A few ingredients I will bring for success. The ingredients I will bring so the park board is a success. Commitment to taking action and not reacting. I will be the eyes and ears of the community. I will be bold, creative, and innovative. I will collaborate and celebrate. I will be open to new ideas. I will champion habitats, biodiversity, and the ecosystem. I will be a champion for the Minneapolis people. I will be a champion for the Minneapolis Park and Rec. I will be a champion for the Minneapolis community and for the planet. In closing, vote for Katherine Kelly, Minneapolis Park Board Commissioner at Large. And together we can. Together we can. Together we can take these ingredients, my passion and the vision, and go forward. I think that's it. My timer's going off.
Well, your timer went off, Candidate Kelly, but ours did not. But thank you for being on top of that. We are grateful for each of you. And before we wrap up, just want a special thank you and appreciation to all of you again who were able to take time out of your evening to join us tonight for this MPRB candidate forum for District 3 and for the Commissioner at Large positions. Your vote is invaluable. We appreciate you, and we know you have more to give if you by simply share the recording with others in your network and encourage them to become more familiar with not only these candidates, but all candidates that they have the opportunity to cast their vote for. Additionally, if you have additional questions for the candidates, specifically the ones that we did not have an opportunity to put forward, we encourage you to get those questions answered by reaching out to those respective campaigns and hearing from the candidates that you believe that you want to learn more about before you cast your vote. An informed voter is a powerful voter, and one that changes all of our lives for the better. To each and every one of the candidates for your boldness, for your courage, and for your vision to believe that you have more to give, more service to provide, regardless of your views, regardless of how you stand, and regardless of the results of this election. You have my deepest gratitude and the gratitude of every sponsor of tonight's forum, and that includes the Phillips West Community Neighborhood Association, the Longfellow Community Council, and the Corcoran Neighborhood Organization. And with that, we are 3 minutes over our time. I apologize for holding you up from your families, your children, your pets, or Netflix. We wish you all the very best and have a lovely evening. And remember to cast your votes.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Good night.